Good evening, everybody. I hope you are all doing well. Please just bear with me for 1 second as I double check to make sure all the audio stuff is working on all of my instances. And it looks like it is, which is a good thing, because we all know by now that that's not always the case. So, again, there is one thing I forgot. Let me just quickly pull that up. Hey, Alan. Glad you could make it. Yeah, just real quick, let me get that all working, and so that should be, yeah, okay, there we go. I almost forgot. Okay. Yeah, as far as things going wrong, that's on the minor end of things. So, once again, I am going to apologize for having to cut yesterday's stream off so quickly. I just, again, did not realize how, risky that Ranma 1/2 would be. And it's especially a shame because I was actually really enjoying it. That show was like right up my alley. Yeah, so unfortunately, while I do have a copy of that VOD, like the recording that I did, I do have that saved on my own hard drive. And I mean, the VOD's still up on Twitch and Kick because I'll be honest, I don't really care if one of those sites bans me. I don't think they will, but I don't really care about those platforms as much. So it's still like viewable, but yeah, unfortunately, yeah, oh yeah, I definitely will, because I mean, at the very least, I will get the first 3 episodes watched, because that's what I, said I was going to do for the tier list. So it would be really bad of me if I just didn't. But yeah, I mean, it was right up my alley. So, but unfortunately, again, I had to. There were like 4 separate instances of them just showing tits on screen, and I'm just not going to risk that on YouTube, even though I understand only a handful of people are watching at any given time, and the VOD was going to go unlisted anyway, so only a few dozen people total would ever watch it. But even so, I'm not risking that. But today, we got the first of the 90s. So we got through another decade, which is always a big milestone. So we're like almost halfway through the marathon, which is that's almost a little depressing just because of how much there's still to go. But yeah. But a milestone is still a milestone, and it's cool to get into the 90s. We're actually getting pretty close. Just a few more titles until we're on to series that are going to be younger than me, which we haven't gotten to yet, because I'm 96, so that'll be interesting. So as always, let's just and we're watching Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water. Let's see, it was heavily censored and changed. They changed the plot, so you can imagine my surprise revisiting a childhood show and getting jumped by a redhead. Yeah, and melons. Yeah. I can imagine that would be kind of interesting. I mean, I do know that, I mean, here in the US, we're no stranger to occasional censorship of foreign media. It's less common nowadays, but back, especially when I was a kid, a lot of times it was not necessarily to hide certain things, although there were some instances of that, like with Sailor Moon. But a lot of times it was just localizations would just think, oh, this is too foreign of a concept, let's just make it more American. Like, the infamous example was the Pokemon dub. They were eating onigiri, and Brock called it a jelly-filled donut. So, but I also imagine, I'm going to guess you're either in the Middle East or North Africa, just because you have mentioned a couple times about speaking Arabic and Arabic dubs, which it'd be a little weird to know about Arabic dubs specifically if you don't speak Arabic. So that's going to be my guess, but I imagine in a lot of those countries in that part of the world, censorship is a bit of an issue, especially with certain topics and themes in media. So, yeah, but that's not a conversation for right now, though. So, let's, as always, let's get start off by reading the summary blurb. Oh, and in the future, I'm going to check, this perfectly legal, I swear, officer website does list genres. So, in the future, if anything else is listed as ecchi, I'm going to not watch it on stream just in case. So yeah. Okay, from Morocco. All right, cool. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I wasn't gonna like explicitly ask, just because, some people don't. People get to choose how much they want to reveal online, and Yeah, I mean, I'm not ashamed. I reveal more about my own life than most probably do on the internet, but even so, I protect my own privacy, so I try to respect everyone else's. So, but yeah, let's read the summary blurb. In 1889, the world is on the pinnacle of great discoveries in technology. In mankind's grasp for the future, a sinister foe known only as Gargoyle, obsessed with restoring the former Atlantean Empire to the glory it once held, begins his plans to take over the world. Nadia, with the help of a young inventor, Jean-Roch Lartigue, which I probably butchered that pronunciation, and Captain Nemo of the submarine Nautilus, must fight to save the world from Gargoyle and Neo-Atlantis. Based on the novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. And actually, I have read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but it was a very long time ago, so I don't honestly remember all that much about it. So I'm going to miss pretty much any references and calls to it, so yeah, I've read it, but it's not actually going to help me in this instance. So, let's just let me kick off my recording, and let's just get right into it. Okay, you read it in French? Okay, interesting. Yeah, well, you know, 20,000 Leagues is known as a classic in America. It's not one of the books that's normally assigned in school. Yeah, we're getting a very different tone than a lot of the shows we've seen up to this point, which I like. I like when a show is willing to kind of do its own thing.
1889年、船舶の謎の遭難事件が相次いで起こった。人々は古代より海に住む怪獣の仕業だと噂し、各国首脳は新兵器による攻撃だと互いに非難し、緊張が高まりつつあった。
The voiceover seems a little bit too quiet compared to the background sounds.
産業革命以来の急速な産業科学の発達の中で、列強各国はアジアやアフリカの植民地をめぐって対立し、衝突を繰り返していた。19世紀末、心ある人々は迫り来る世界大戦の影に怯えていたのである。
I mean, I do like how the starts of these. Okay, so good. I'm glad it's not just me. Oh, and just because OPs have been an issue just pretty consistently, I'm gonna be skipping over the OPs. I'll still at some point, probably while I'm writing the script, I'll watch them on my own. But yeah, OPs have just been consistently getting hit lately, so I'm gonna skip those just to save myself a bit of trouble. Okay, this is an interesting art style. I actually... It's different than what we've seen so far. Like, the backgrounds look a lot more like... not artistic, because that's not the wrong word, but more like an illustration than anything we've seen up to this point. So that's actually very interesting. Okay, yeah, this is a very... Yeah, just aesthetically, this is so different from anything we've watched so far. Okay, so it does look like a lot of... Yeah, okay, so it does look like, at least as far as budget-wise, it was probably not the most money was put into the animation. So I mean, it's noticeable how little of the background is actually moving. Yeah, I agree. It's like it is very... Yeah, vibrant is exactly the word that should be used. I mean, a very common thing with animation in general is that a lot of times it's, they're kind of meant for the foreground and the background to kind of blend together to kind of be, again, just a representative of this fictional world. This feels a little bit different than that. Like, it feels like almost like, imagine you're watching a stage play and they have this colorful background, like a painting in the background to serve as the set. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting from this. And I'm not saying that as like a good or bad thing, but as an interesting thing. Okay, so yeah, I'm not 100% sure what this event is. I mean, I'm sure it's something that's reasonably well known, but I am not too familiar with this era of European history. Like, I mean, I know it was similar to in America back in these times. We had the World Fair, where a lot of technological innovations were showcased to the public there. So I imagine this is a similar thing just happening in France. Okay, so this is... Okay, I'm not sure exactly how much 20,000 francs is converted, but I don't feel like taking the time to look it up. Okay, wait, let me double check what the time was. 1889. Okay, so yeah, okay, so yeah, airplanes would have been a thing. Not like a major thing yet, but I mean, just 20 years later, they're going to be a part of World War I when it happens. Yeah, I'm just imagining, like, to people in this time, this type of competition must have been very, very exciting to watch, just because, airplanes weren't a common thing back then. They were still a very new technology. So, so actually being able to see something in flight was probably, like, just mind-blowing at the time. Yeah, man, you gotta glide. You can't try to flap your wings. I mean, at a glance, that looks, like a decently designed aircraft, or glider at least. Okay, so sea monsters, I guess, are a thing, so there are some, fictional elements. And I guess that makes sense since it's based on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where there definitely were sea monsters in that. I actually really like the voice acting so far. Like, I know I mention it a lot, but like I generally think that some of the best voice acting comes when you can tell that the voice actors are having a ton of fun with their roles. And these characters, and especially the older guy, definitely feels like they're having fun with it. Okay, I recognize her from the cover image, so I'm guessing that's probably Nadia. Okay, but I like the the setup for the initial conflict. I mean, I mean, calling it a conflict might even be pushing it a little bit. The initial plot device, which is the flying competition with stakes, which are the 20,000 francs, and then again, a little bit of, again, conflict is probably not the right way to put it, but that's the closest word I can to what I'm thinking of, in that, he gets distracted by his lower brain and is going to potentially put that competition at risk by, getting distracted.
間違いない。あの子だ。お前たち、絶対に逃がすんじゃないよ。
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the 20,000 specifically was meant to be a reference more so than an actual real thing. But also, yeah, come to think of it, if it's 6,000 USD, and I don't know if the exchange rate was comparable back then, but if it was, holy shit, that's a lot of fucking money. Because inflation is a thing. I mean, even just in the time I've been alive, inflation's gone up by, like, inflation has pretty much doubled the cost of everything in the US, at least. Okay, I do like her design a lot, actually. Her... like, she stands out without it being too distracting.
ねえキング、私の生まれた国ってどこかな？やっぱりあなたと同じアフリカかしらね。
So is that like a lion? I'll be honest, I initially thought it was a rat.
そうね。空を飛べたら探しに行けるかもね。
飛べるさ。僕はジャンロック・ラルティールって言うんだ。君を空へ連れて行ける男さ。
Yeah, that's the thing. Again, yeah, animals voiced by humans. I don't know why that became the trend, because we've seen it even from, like, some of the earliest stuff we've watched. The animal characters have been voiced by humans, and I've also seen it in modern things as well. Like, I remember taking note of it I was reading a visual novel one time, and it was set, in a tropical area, and there was a dolphin character. That dolphin was voiced by a human woman, just kind of chattering all the time, and it was absolutely just fucking hilarious.
あれねえ、信じてくれないの？本当に飛べるんだよ。ほら、あの飛行大会で飛ぶためにルアーブルから来たんだ。ねえ、君はどこから来たの？待って、今当てるから。インドでしょ。あれ違った？
ごめんなさい。悪いけど、私あなたのこと知らないの。だから。
よかった。やっと口を聞いてくれて、言葉が通じないのかと思っちゃったよ。あ、ごめん。そんなつもりじゃないんだ。
嘘。あなたもこの肌の色が珍しいんでしょ。
Okay, that's an interesting. Okay.
どうかしら。
It is interesting if they're going to touch on racial tensions at the time. Because I do know that around this time, racism definitely was an issue, but it was less of an issue, particularly in France, than it was in other parts of Europe and the United States. So, I mean, especially when you consider that in the United States, this is only, 40 years out from the Civil War? So, things are still kind of recovering at this point, especially since the Reconstruction era was just such a disaster that it slowed down progress substantially. But again, Paris was like kind of the place to go if you wanted to not have to deal with that. Okay, so it is a lion. That answers questions.
もうそんな暗い顔してないでさ。一度しかない人生だ。パーッと行こうよ。パーッと。何これ？すごい発明だね。
キング。
Okay, I will say that's kind of almost an interesting inversion of a lot of tropes, and I don't think this is necessarily what they were trying to do here, but it's an interesting result of it nonetheless, where it's pretty common in fiction to have technology kind of be mistaken for magic, more or less. But this almost looks like the inverse of that, where magic is mistaken for technology. And that's because it's set in a time period where there's so much massive technological innovation happening that people are probably just thinking that the boundaries of technology were practically infinite, which is, I mean, this is like Industrial Revolution, and again, ground has been broken. Like, again, airplanes are a thing now, which is just, actually, Are they a thing? Let me just quickly. I can't remember exactly. Oh, 1903. Okay, so this is actually set before the Wright brothers made their first flight. Okay. So so that's actually different. So they were probably getting close at this period in time where, because I know obviously the Wright brothers weren't the first people to even consider the idea of flight or anything like that, but they were the first to kind of successfully do it. So this, okay, it actually changes things a lot if this is before the Wright brothers. Although they could be playing a little bit fast and loose with time periods. That's not uncommon in writing, but I don't know. But it doesn't even matter to what my original point was, where the things like flight is like boundaries that were previously thought impossible are starting to be broken or at least pushed up against. So that's why people are probably in this time period just thinking like, man, the boundaries of what technology can do are probably limitless. So again, things that are magical could be conceivable as something that is, just something people are inventing. So again, I think it's just an interesting way of just kind of inverting the common trope of of technology being mistaken for magic, with magic being mistaken for technology, if that is what this is, which I can't really say just yet, but that's what I'm thinking.
人前でイチャつくのもいい加減に惜しい。さっきから見てれば、いつまでも。
子供に当たるのは良くないですよ。
I mean, that is true, Eduardo. There were, I know there were like balloons then, but I mean, they're doing like a flying competition in plane-like structures or gliders. So, we're thinking of a different type of balloon. I mean, a different type of flight. Not a different type of balloon, different type of flight.
そうそう、早く本題に入った方が。
Yeah, and this woman has a
胸のガ
very
ラス玉をよ
striking
こすんだよ。
design as well.
持ち主のあんたを探すのにヨーロッパ中を駆けずり回ったんだからね。さっさと押し。
さもないと。
おやめ。
Yeah. So, okay. Again, I can complain about trigger discipline, although in this scenario, it actually kind of makes sense that he would have his finger on the trigger. Although, I don't know. Can we?
さっさと押し。
さもないと。
Let's see if he. Okay, so it just kind of goes. It just skips frames from holster to hand, so we don't know if he actually drew it with his finger on the trigger. So I can't really complain about the trigger discipline, since bad guy pointing a gun at the good guy actually kind of makes sense, even though you still shouldn't. But what I will notice is it doesn't look like this bazooka here has a trigger at all. So I'm not sure how he's supposed to fire it, but I don't know.
おやめ。子供相手にみっともないよ。
Oh wait, that actually might have.
おやめ。
Okay,
子供相手にみっともないよ。
he lifts it and we get a better. Okay, it does have a trigger. Okay. Although, yeah, I will. Okay, that's an interesting thing, like where the trigger guard is just almost like a cross guard. Okay, that's interesting. Although I also wonder why he's just kind of one-handing it, because those things have some kick to it. Yeah, I'll be honest. At this point, I don't think the reference would hold up much more than the red hair.
よこすんだよ。
やだよ。
She's also too calm and collected to be Eris.
はい。
ハンスン。やっておしまい。
I love that the fucking lion did a little somersault. Okay, another thing I am noticing is that I actually do really like the music to this scene, but the music is actually drowning out the voice acting. And it may also just be me. I'm gonna have to actually pay some more attention to it. But it looks like the lion almost looks like they're not quite getting the proportions consistent always. Sometimes it looks a little bit bigger or smaller. Yeah. Yeah, physics is just not really happening here.
あの身のこなしと変な猫といえば決まってるじゃないか。作戦変更。人が来ないうちにさっさと降りるんだよ。
軽い身のこなしと変な猫。ライオン。そうか、サーカスだ。
Actually, that's actually a pretty good. It's actually really interesting because that's a pretty logical conclusion to come to based on all the stuff he saw with the crazy athleticism and the exotic animal. That's actually pretty funny. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'll be honest, the complete lack of background animation is starting to be a little distracting.
よかった、無事だったんだ。
Yeah, seeing like the little bits of animation, contrasting the parts that are just completely unanimated, it is kind of jarring.
団長さん、今日は出たくないの。何か悪いことが起こるような気がするの。
ダメだ。今日お前は自分の朝飯を食ったな。はい。じゃあその分はしっかり働け。
Again, that voice acting is very good. On the girl more so than the ring mask, the ring, whatever the fucking word is.
そうか、ナディアって言うんだ。
Okay, this is actually, I am liking this scene. It's actually doing a good job of portraying, an exciting circus performance without necessarily having the animation budget to really showcase it.
団長さん、ちょっとお話ししたいことがあるんですの。
Okay, so based on the stuff we're seeing, I'm guessing the girl's a slave? Or is she? I don't know, actually. Or maybe she's an indentured servant. It's hard to say, because unless my history is completely off, then, slavery had long since been abolished in at least mainland France by this time period. Because, I'm pretty sure France had gotten rid of slavery before the United States, and the United States had gotten rid of slavery several decades prior, so maybe they'll explain it, maybe they won't, or maybe the Japanese writers just kind of got the timelines mixed up. Who knows? Okay. And I actually also do like the little nonverbal storytelling of having her kind of walk sad with the happy circus music in the background.
Bonjour, mademoiselle. どうした？お前のお姉さんだ。
そう、グランディス・グランバーというのよ。探したわよ、ナディアちゃん。さあ、お姉さんと帰りましょうね。
あ、やっぱり女の子には花だよな。いや、離して。いや。
ジタバタジタバタとうるさいね。今から私があんたの保護者になったんだからね。ほら、今までの礼金もきちんと払ってあるんだよ。団長さん。
そういうことだ。
Okay, I'm still not completely sure what the various dynamics
一緒
are
に行き
here.
ましょうね
Maybe it doesn't really matter, but I don't know. That's okay. That's an interesting. I don't know how that really works, but that's an interesting concept for a vehicle.
ねえ
Okay,
ナ
so
ディア
one thing I am actually liking is I like how they're kind of doing not quite a full-on steampunk type of thing, but they're utilizing the technology of this time period, which was people were very interested in technology at this point in time because industrial revolution was happening, new inventions were happening, like new groundbreaking innovations were happening in technology specifically all over the place. Like there was a light electricity was starting to be used, steam power was starting to be used, like all these crazy innovations were happening. So kind of having a little bit wild and out there types of innovations to be used as this as set dressing for this story actually fits really well because it kind of scratches that steampunk itch without actually going into full-on steampunk territory.
ナディアってばさっきの3人に追われてんだろこれで逃げようよ私一人で逃げられるわ慣れ慣れしくナディアと呼ばないでよもう見せ物じゃないのよそんな意地張ってないでさ乗りなよどうしてあいつらはその石を狙ってるんだいそんなに大事なものなの言いたくなければ言わなくてもいいよあの人たちは
Okay.
大丈夫人の足じゃとても追いつけないさ
I will say so far, I mean, this is definitely still early on, and this could definitely change. I am finding the main character, not Nadia, but the kid, a little bit annoying. But that just might be because, has that kind of over-endearing, overly positive type of character that I am a little bit exhausted by in general. But again, this is just kind of introductory stuff. No real significant character work has been done for him just yet, so that could definitely change in the future. But at the moment, Nadia interests me like 10 times more than any other character does. Oh, that's neat.
すごい鉄の
Again,
車
yeah,
だ
kind of going,
誰の発明かな
leaning in that steampunk direction, but not quite full on
もう
steampunk.
逃がさないよ対面に会う前にこっちへおいであらそう
I also like how she was able to change into this uniform in like 30 seconds. Or maybe there was a time skip that was just not
待
clear.
ってました大人をバカにしたらどうなるか教えてやるぜそんなおもちゃで逃げられるものかやりますぜ姉さん
あー好きに惜しい
ハンソン 分かってるよ
I'll be honest, I love the visual design of those two henchmen villains because I don't know what it is, but the white suits, the sunglasses, and the colorful bow ties, the oversized colorful bow ties, it's like it's funny. Like they're not particularly intimidating, I'll be honest, just mostly because of their visual design, the fact that they're kind of so far been portrayed as somewhat incompetent, and also, just their dynamic is a little more cheerful than you would expect, evil villains to be. But yeah, honestly, I could see them being a lot of fun as, continuing antagonists in this series. Although, and I'm actually more interested in them than I am with the woman. Okay, yeah, they're definitely kind of going into the, not realistic territory.
ナディアあれちょっとやめてよ危ないじゃないか
大人の仕事を邪魔しちゃいけないよ少し反省してきなさ
さあ邪魔が入らないうちに飛行モードでずらかるんだよ
Flight mode, okay.
死んじゃうじゃないか
It's just getting a little more and more ridiculous as things go on. 'Cause- Oh, that's an interesting way of doing it. Okay, I know that was meant to just be kind of like a little bit of flavor, but I think that's actually really cool, being able to put in a punch card and having like a musical component to the technology. I don't know. That just kind of gets my attention. I like that.
どうします？
まあいいさ。ブルーウォーターはもうこっちのもんだからね。グッバイ。アディオス。さようなら。
Okay, yeah, because I imagine, yeah, I do think actually blimps and zeppelins were zeppelins. I think they were a thing at this time. So, okay, so that would be like a known way of doing things.
もう少しスピードは出ないのかい。
これで全速ですよ。
これじゃ地面を走った方が速かったね。99番機日の本のオールを置いた飛び行く。
Okay. Okay, so yeah, that I will say my kind of initial thought about that makes a lot of sense because I mean it definitely looks like more of a glider than anything else. So it's not going to be able to kind of fly indefinitely. And also, definitely wouldn't be able to catch up with that. But... I'm not sure how he gained any height, but it probably doesn't really matter. They're probably just saying don't worry about it. Yeah, and I'll be honest, Alan, your statement of fuck physics seems just more and more accurate the longer this goes. Oh yeah, okay, so like, they're all dead.
Nadia, 大丈夫？でも取れないの。ちょっと待って。お、顔に出てきてる。なんともそこの猫。大変ですよ。こいつ。
Yeah, I am too actually. This it's very engaging.
ありがとう。
Wow, he is a terrible shot. Like I want to see how far. Okay, so it looked like he was like 10, 15 feet at most from them, and that's being very generous. The fact that he took 2 shots and missed at that range, even with the chaotic stuff, but just like... Holy shit. Okay, I can see him missing... Yeah, that was good moves from the lion, but yeah, I can definitely see missing the lion. That makes sense to me. But missing them is fucking ridiculous. Like, even if you've never fired a gun before, at that range, you have to try to not hit.
なかなかやるじゃないかあの子たち。でもね、私は絶対に諦めないよ。ブルーウォーターを。
Yeah, that almost makes that ending right there almost makes me imagine like Team Rocket getting launched into the sky. Yeah, that was a pretty significant drop. I mean, again, physics are more like the laws of physics in this series appear to be more like the suggestions of physics. Hey, we got a cat joining us.
水の上ならあれ持っては来れないよ。この船で逃げよう。寒くない？
あなたの名前は？
あれ、言わなかったっけ？
ごめんなさい、覚えてないの。
ひどいな。
But honestly, that's also a pretty decent way to get some excitement in the series, while also kind of breaking that initial tension between them. Because, yeah, I mean, if you look at it from Nadia's perspective, can't exactly still be annoyed with the kid once you get your ass saved.
ジャンって言うんだ。
ありがとうじゃん。助けてくれて。
これからどうするの？サーカスに帰るの？
帰れないわ。もう。
うちの人はいないわ、そんなの。
Okay. Also a decent way to get some exposition to the audience, because it actually makes sense for them to be having this conversation right now.
ねえ、ルアーブルにおいでよ。あそこならおじさんの家もあるし、おじさんもおばさんも親切な人だからきっと力になってくれるよ。
おーいじゃ
おじさん、
ん見ろじゃん、特別賞だぞ。規定外で賞金はなしだけどな。
やった。じゃあ先行ってるよ。
Okay. So yeah, I'm starting to think more that you were right earlier when you were saying that it was probably the 20,000 francs was more meant to be a reference to the inspiration for this show. It's not the source material because this is not an adaptation, but it's inspired by 20,000 Leagues. So it does seem to be a reference to that, because I cannot imagine being so cavalier about the not winning that money just because, again, 20,000 francs, which is, the equivalent of like $6,000, absolutely insane money in the late 1800s.
おう、気をつけてな。うまくやれよ。
Do apologize if you hear any noise. I got a cat kind of fucking around with the microphone. Let me just, actually, she's kind of brushed up against the wires. Let me just make sure that, okay, good, she didn't knock anything out, because I was worried that she would have potentially done that, because that's the kind of thing she would do. She's a bit of a troublemaker. That's a good point, Alan. It is interesting how he, reacted differently than you might necessarily expect from, that type of interaction. Yeah, I mean, he was caught off guard initially, you could tell, but I don't know. I actually, we don't see a whole lot of it just yet, but it does seem like that John and his uncle do have actually a pretty solid relationship going on. Let's so like the little we've seen of it so far actually it's very believable, even though we haven't actually gotten a real dive into it. Let's see. I feel odd with the contrast of Steam tech with Pokemon physics. Normally shows with imaginary tech keep physics semi-consistent to help the suspension of disbelief. I mean, I kind of agree, but I also feel like they established this kind of dynamic early on, and they're definitely going for a not realistic set kind of thing. Like, they're not trying to make it so it's like, oh, actually believable technology, because they're just kind of going over the top with it, doing just really kind of wacky shit, like almost like full on steampunk territory. Not quite though. So yeah, and I agree with Alan. It's looking like they're strongly hinting that magic is gonna come into effect, and they already referenced sea monsters, which, again, if this is based on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that's probably a thing that's actually happened, because 20,000 Leagues did have monsters in it as well. But yeah, okay, but yeah, as just kind of a basic introductory thing, that made sense.
海の怪物による謎の遭難事件が相次ぐ
Okay, so
中、
yeah, it definitely seems like
科
sea
学
monsters
文
are
明の
like a
象
very
徴である
real
パリ
thing
の万国博覧会が行われてい
in
た。
this world.
そこで発明好きの少年ジャンはライオンの子供キングとサーカスの少女ナディアと出会う。彼女は謎の宝石ブルーウォーター
I
を
like how
持
the
っている。
narrator mentioned the
それを狙
lion
う悪
before
者3人
Nadia.
組にナディアがさらわれてしまうが、ジャンの活躍により無事助け出された。サーカスに帰れなくなったナディアとキングはジャンと共にルアーブルに向かう。
I'll agree. I
Nadia
mean,
no blue.
it didn't really set off. I mean, it definitely didn't finish the setup that I think the show is going to need moving forward. But honestly, just to introduce somebody to the show, get everything moving, while also introducing the primary characters. Yeah, I think it was actually very effective. It really, and I'm going to have to guess. This is speculation because I have not seen the rest of the show yet. But I'm guessing that the first episode was almost kind of designed to be a microcosm of everything we can kind of expect to see moving forward. Because it felt like there were a lot of distinct segments in that episode, like there were initial segments with very specific goals in mind. There were some, heavier character stuff going on, even though it didn't dive too deeply into it. There were showcases of Nadia's athleticism. There was the technological building stuff type of scene. There was the action scene with the villains. Like, there was a lot of individual things happening there. Mickey, don't scratch that. Sorry, my cat was scratching my one of my chairs. I couldn't allow her to do that. Sorry about that, but yeah. Again, it just seemed like they were just kind of showing us little glimpses of everything that this show wants to do. So, yeah, as a first episode, honestly, very, very good.
ウォーターには一体どんな秘密があるのだろうか。
Oh, episode 2 okay, so that's actually really interesting. And I'm guessing it's 39 episodes? Yeah. Okay, so they said episode 2 out of 39. That is really interesting to me. Because what that tells me is they had an endpoint in mind. And yeah, no season 2, it looks like. But yeah, that's actually really cool, the fact that they went in knowing how long the series was going to be. So that actually let them have a chance to build a story around that specific amount of runtime, because one of the persistent issues with many anime, and it's not like a universal thing by any stretch of the imagination, but this is especially an issue with a lot of the long-running shonen series, because I mean how a lot of shonen kind of start off is in like magazines or things akin to that, things like Shonen Jump, where they get published if they're good enough, and if they do well enough, then they just kind of keep going until they stop being enough of a draw, and that's when they're dropped. So a lot of those series just can't really have any idea of how long they're going to run, and a lot of times the successful ones go for a lot longer than the original author would have intended, and a lot of stuff has to get cut short because they say, hey, you're getting cut off after this amount of time. And then adaptations tend to kind of inherit those issues, so that's why there are often a lot of pacing issues, especially with the really long-running shonen. So, again, knowing from the start how long your show is going to be is a huge asset. Like, it is fucking insane how much a good writer can do with that information. So that actually really intrigues me to know that this show knew exactly how much runtime they had to work with, and build a story with that in mind. And I'll be honest, a lot of the best shows I've ever seen were clearly made with an idea of how long they were going to be in mind. Yeah, I agree. It definitely builds expectations. I mean, especially for me, as somebody who, I would say I have an above average understanding of writing and like the ideas behind it. So seeing that they have advantages that other creatives wouldn't necessarily have, on top of already having a very strong first episode, honestly, yeah, my expectations are a lot higher than they were 5 minutes ago.
ナディア、ここまで来ればもう大丈夫。あいつらもう諦めたさ。元気を出しなよ。ルアーブルについては
I actually really like Nadia's eyes as well. She looks the turquoise of her eyes is, contrasts with her purple hair, both of which are not like the most natural colors, but it works really well with this character. Like, again, she kind of stands out, but not in a way that's distracting, I would say, because so far most of the other characters have mostly realistic hair colors. I mean, it's not common to see hair like as bright as the villains, but red hair is also something that's not alien to the real world. and the purple, that's not a natural hair color, but it actually really fits the character. Also, let me just see something real quick. If I'm thinking correctly, okay, yeah, okay, I see why she. Okay, let me pull this up, because yeah, she that's what she reminds. She reminds me of Shantae. Okay, that was bugging me for a while, but yeah. Yeah, I do kind of agree with you, Alan. Like I said in the last episode, I am a little bit, a little exhausted by characters like that are a little too, peppy, just, again, just overly optimistic, overly happy, just nonstop balls of positivity. Just because, yeah, I don't know, it's a bit of an overused character archetype, I think. But I will also acknowledge that we have not gotten a lot of time to work with him just yet. So there's still a lot of room to do interesting things with him. And and there is also true that there is a trope of having, overly positive characters have really dark surroundings. But there are also, I think that is going to depend so much on how well executed that is as to whether or not that's going to annoy me. And I mean, they already have kind of hinted on things because he mentioned that he doesn't have parents of his own. So we don't, and presumably they were eaten by a sea monster. So, yeah, and that is also true. I mean, it all depends on how well. I mean, it feels like a bit of a cop out to say this, but whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing is all dependent on how well written he is. Honestly, that's one of those types of characters that can kind of go either way. And I will say, I prefer a character who's positive but with a sad history than one that's just nothing but positive and, just, happy, encouraging. Yeah, we can do this, guys. Yeah, that character that type of character lacks depth, but at least when they have a tragic backstory, there's something there to make them a little bit more three-dimensional.
早いとこ、あの子たちに追いつくんだよ。ぐずぐずしてると日が暮れちまうからね。
任せてください。
やれやれ、あんな子供に振り回されたんじゃかなわないよ、まったく。
Yeah, again, the more I think of it, like, I just can't get that connection. She looks so much like Shantae. It's actually kind of hilarious.
ナディア、空を飛べたらさ。本当に空を飛べたらどこへ行くつもりだったの？
私の生まれた国へ帰りたいの。
生まれた国ってどこなんだい？
わかんない。
わかんないって覚えてないの？
覚えてないの。
Okay, yeah, I'm not even going to speculate what that country might
キン
be.
グはアフリカだっていうのよ。なぜか私もそう思うの。
Okay.
でもアフリカは遠いし、それにとっても大きいのよ。
Okay, that's an interesting thing because, I mean, I know they're in Europe right now, but like that, and it's not saying it's an insignificant distance to get to Africa, but it's like not that ridiculous. Like it's realistic for a person to be able to come up with the means to get from France to Africa. Like, especially since I think France actually still had colonies in Africa at the time. So, because I'm pretty sure that was like a major contributing factor in World War I was that there was an African front of World War I just because of how many European nations had colonies there, with France being one of them. So this does not seem like an unreasonable thing to want to do. Like, I think if she wanted to get to Africa, she could get to Africa pretty easily. Not to say that it would be no effort whatsoever. You'd have to, be able to get passage on a ship, but...
遠いな。
but it's like definitely doable. There's gonna be supply routes between Europe and Africa.
あれは
なんだろう。
I kind of agree with you, Eduardo, but for a different reason. For me, the big issue is, honestly, I think it's a lot of times it's the way the animation is being done that does kind of take away from that. I do think overall things are going pretty strong, and this might have just been kind of a, since it's based on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I imagine the kind of civilization side of things is going to kind of just be a footnote in the entire experience. I imagine a lot of it is going to be without like very many people surrounding the main cast and the antagonists. So I can kind of forgive the civilization side of things not feeling real just because they're probably not going to be a factor for most of the story. But at the same time, for me, it's the animation, the fact that so much of the background is not animated at all. And in ways that it's just very jarring. And sometimes even there will be parts that are animated and parts that are not. And that just, yeah, it feels very artificial. But I can also acknowledge that that's not the focus of this show. The focus is more on what these two are going to be doing. And again, I imagine they're going to be leaving cities and towns behind and, you know, exploring the open waters. Because again, they've established that Jean has had his family supposedly killed by sea monsters. So that's probably going to be something that's going to kind of drive him forward. That's probably going to be something he's going to want to explore. He is not convinced his father is really dead, so that he's probably going to want to, you know, investigate that. Nadia wants to explore, you know, Africa. So, you know, part of that is going to be not necessarily going over the ocean, but going over the sea at least. So again, I'm imagining that Paris is just kind of the spawn points and not where the story is going to kind of play out for the most part.
すっごい全部鉄でできてる船だ。でもなんか見たことあるな。あ、あの3人組だわ。
Okay.
やっぱり、空を飛べて水の上を走れるなんてすっごい車だな。そんなことより早く逃げなきゃ。
Okay. And I actually do really like how this guy is constantly getting distracted by cool, innovative machinery. Like he's like, oh, that's fucking cool. And he's like, wait, no, they're trying to chase us.
今頃気がついてももう逃げられやしないよ。エンジン全開。
了解。
Yeah, man, I just can't get over how exciting this soundtrack is. I really like it. I will say I do think the audio balance is just completely off, but at least the music itself is very good.
あー、捕まえた。鬼ごっこ終わりだよ。観念をし。じゃあ、大丈夫。こうなったら最後の手段
And
だ。
that, let me actually watch that again. I don't know if that was an issue of just kind of artifacting in the recording that we're watching, or if it's actually an issue with some of the way they design certain things, because the way certain things focused was just weird. It looked almost like an error in like filming from an actual camera, where the focus was just off. Like, because I see how this, because this is very blurry. Like, the subtitles are clear, but everything else in the image, again, looks like it's just out of focus. And then the next shot, okay, this is more in focus. And now this is also, the focus is just weird on this one, where it looks like again, this looks like what you would expect if they were filming with an actual camera and the focus settings were just off, because even though he's the one talking, it looks like the focus is on her, because he looks just a little bit out of focus. That is such a fucking weird thing. I don't know why they did that. Or, again, it may have just been an artifact from from how this got preserved. I can't say for sure, but it is so distracting.
こうなったら最後の手段だ。ホーム分離。水中翼戦エメロード2世発進。
That is so stupid. I love it. Yeah, I'll be honest, Alan. I cannot tell. It's strange. Oh. I don't know. Like, I genuinely can't tell if that was intentional or not.
20キロは引き離したよ。あの翼で船を持ち上げて水の抵抗を少なくするんだ。これがスピードの出る秘密さ。すごいわちゃ。大発明じゃない。まあね。このアイデアは僕と同じフランス人が考えたんだ。それをちょいっと改良しただけさ。
Okay, so
あなたみたいな子供が作ったなんて。
okay, so while they are definitely going in the over the top kind of unrealistic side of the technology of the time, they are actually seem to be keeping it somewhat grounded in actual real principles, because like that is an actual thing he's discussing, because I mean that's actually used, but yeah, it's interesting. But they're again taking it into unrealistic directions where it's like, yeah, there's no way that he actually created something like this, but yeah, it is actually based off things that were known at the time.
信じられない。メカには僕ちょっと自信があるんだ。すごーい。日曜大工の天才ね。そりゃないよ。ごめんなさい。
Okay, I will say Nadia seems to have just completely flipped as a character. Like, she went from like just completely depressed all the time
この仕掛
to
け
now
ま
kind
だ
of
連
almost
続運
like
転には耐えられないん
giddy.
だ。
それで
Interesting.
どうなっちゃったの？
壊れちゃっ
インチキな発明。感心して損しちゃった。
た。ごめんね。
Okay. But honestly, again, I do, as much as I do think that sudden shift in her character is strange, I actually do like the way they're slowly kind of building rapport with one another, and they're actually starting to, like, become friends.
それも発明品なの？
うん、懐中電灯さ。自分でモーターを回して電気を作るんだ。
Okay.
ちょっと大変だけどね。
本当大変そうね。
I mean, I've actually used a flashlight just like that. Not quite like that. The crank was going a different way.
ここがおばさん
But
ちだよ。
yeah.
ちょっと待っててね。
Yeah, I don't know how old these people are, but yeah, it's hard to really say. So they definitely do seem young. I just don't know how young. There's like a couple year range they could fall into, and I just don't know what it is.
なんだいじゃんかい。
ただいま、おばさん。
ああ、おかえり。あんた一人かい？
おじさんはまだパリに残ってるんだ。
そうかい。大方また遊びほうけてるんだろうよ。まったくろくに仕事もしないんだから。
で、おばさん、お願いがあるんですけど、しばらくの間、女の子を一人おばさん家に泊めてもらえませんか？
なんだって？なんだよあの子は。
パリで知り合ったんです。で、実は悪いやつに追われてて、それで。
じゃあ、ちょっとおいで。
ちょっと待ってて。
I noticed they really very commonly hide her eyes when she's not feeling 100%. Like, it's one of those things where, you know, not an uncommon visual trope, but also it seems like they're using it a lot. I wonder if it's gonna get old. I don't know. We'll see.
何ですか？
ジャン・ロック・ラルティーグ。あんた、見ず知らずの娘を止めるつもりかい？黒人の子だよ。おまけに不細工な猫まで連れて何されるか分かったもんじゃないよ。
ナディアはそんな子じゃないよ。
いいや、お前はあの子に騙されてるんだよ。いいかいじゃん。この際だから言っとくけどね、せっかく兄さんが残してくれたお金を全部あのガラクタの山に帰っちまうつもりなのかい？
そういうわけじゃないけど。
まったくくだらない発明とやらに次から次に使っちまって。
今度は大丈夫。自信
Okay,
あるん
that
だ。
actually makes a lot of sense as to how he's able to explore his passion for mechanical stuff. It's yeah, good because he just I guess has money from his father. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
あんな飛びもしない飛行機とやらを作るのに山を一つ撃っちまうなんて正気の沙汰じゃないよ。 その上今度あの子の面倒まで見るつもりなのかい？もうお金だって残ってないんだよ。あんたにちゃんとした教育も受けさせなきゃいけないし、見も知らない、それも黒人の女の子とあんな大きな猫の面倒見るなんて、まあ私はごめんだね。
ごめんねおばさん、また来るよ。じゃあ
ちょっとじゃあ待ちなさいじゃん。待ちなさいったら。
ナディア待って。
I actually do find it interesting that they've made this character, this older woman, the aunt, like not likable, because I mean, there's definitely parts of her character that are meant to be unlikable, but also somewhat sympathetic. Like she doesn't actually seem overly malicious, just kind of, you know, a little racist because that's kind of how people were at the time, but I don't know, it's interesting because they made her have a lot of negative characteristics, but not be but she doesn't strike me as an overtly bad person. So that's an interesting, not a whole lot of writers can actually strike that type of balance, especially with not having a whole lot of time with her just yet. So, but I could also see her character kind of developing in either direction if she even remains a feature in the story, which she very well might not. Yeah, kind of, Alan. Yeah, and I mean, I think she kind of has that idea, but I don't know. She almost seems like a softer version of Claire, because Claire was actually like more overt about her negative aspects than this aunt is. But I don't know. She just seems this aunt just strikes me as like a fundamentally mixed bag as a person, where again has her negatives, some of which are rooted in the time period, but also just like a lot of her concerns are actually somewhat legitimate, and she seems to have an interest in looking out for the well-being of her nephew, of Jean. So, you know, it's an interesting character.
ありがとう。でもいいの？ほっといて。
そんな。ねえ、ちょっと待ってよ。どうしちゃったのさ。
これ以上あなたに迷惑はかけられないわ。さようなら。
迷惑だなんてそんなことないよ。そうだ。それなら僕の家へ行こうよ。
あなたの家？
うん、少し遠いけど僕一人だからさ、気兼ねはいらないよ。ん
Yeah, honestly, the sound design right here is actually pretty good. Like the background, like it actually like genuinely sounds like exactly like certain like summer nights I've heard. I mean, granted, I've never been to France, but here in the U.S., I've heard nights that sound exactly like that. With not necessarily with an owl, because they're not very many of those over here, but at least not where I live. But you know, the sounds of the bugs and the crickets and all that stuff, like, yeah, it's pretty spot on.
疲れた？
うんうん。でもなんて長い一本道なのかしら。
これがそのうち滑走路として役に立つのさ。
滑走路？
飛行機の走る道だよ。
ふーん。誰のお墓なの？
エトワールド・ラセーヌ。
Yeah, actually, I do. I agree with you, Alan. I mean, I like Nadia as a character because, I mean, you can tell she's kind of inherently distrustful of everyone, presumably because she just, you know, most of her interactions with people have likely been fairly negative. But, like, you can see that she's, like, not, like, completely walled off in that regard, where she is distrustful, but, like, is able to look past it with some prodding. Like, honestly, again, like what I've said in the last episode, I think is holding true, where I am so much more interested in Nadia than anyone else in the show so far, where, you know, Jean is starting to grow on me, but he's still, like, he does not seem all that interesting just yet. But, again, I am definitely open to that changing. We'll see.
6世までの墓だよ。今まで惜しくも空に飛び立てなかった飛行機たちの鉄の墓標さ。
そうなの。
さあ、あのうちだよ。
変わったお家ね。
Oh, that's it.
自慢の我が家さ。
Wait, I gotta see something.
あのうちだよ。
Does it? Okay, so it's not. We can't see it because of the blocked. Because I was just wondering for a second. It's like, does he have a water mill with no river or lake going here? But like, yeah, I mean, so far, yeah, it does look like it could definitely be a dual protagonist kind of thing. Although it did definitely start with a look at Jean. So I don't know. It again, it's one of those things. It might just be a full-on ensemble, like, well, not like a ensemble as in like a huge cast of characters, but like the focus is on the group rather than the individuals being the sole focus. But okay, there's still time to let it cook. I don't know just yet, but yeah. So yeah, we can't see it from this angle. I'm very curious, like, you know, because that's a water mill, but like, I don't remember seeing any bodies of water. Oh, and also slight little oddity here. I don't know if that's supposed to be on the hill in the background, but that looks like it's just kind of floating in the air. Okay.
変わったお家ね。
自慢の我が家さ。
Yeah, and just from that angle, we just don't see. Yeah, okay, and I think I think this shot right here is actually a perfect example of some of the things that I was saying earlier about how it's weird about what parts of the background are and aren't animated. Just because the seagulls are moving, you can see them flying, you can see the ship moving, but then all these sailors, even the ones that like this guy looks like he's right in the middle of a movement of a motion, but they're all just not animated, they're still frames. It's so jarring, the contrast between still shots and animation. Like, I almost think it would have made more sense if they just kind of had like this all be still and they just panned from one side to the other. That would at least feel, again, that would be a way of, they could do the cost cutting thing while also making it not seem just weird. I mean, this does seem like a kind of an experimental show. It does feel like it's trying out new things visually, or at least things that I haven't seen in this marathon up to this point, but I don't know, it's not really working on me. Yes, I do agree that the background track, the backing, the sound effects the ambient sound effects, I should say, are very good. Like shockingly good. And overall, yeah, I do agree that the soundtrack works pretty well, especially during the scenes where it's meant to take more of a focus. My guess, Eduardo, is that he probably felt like, having an adult take care for her needs was probably the more responsible thing to do, or like that he felt that again, my guess was he was trying to send her to somebody else's care so that she could be looked after. But again, that's just kind of speculation, whereas I don't know. Okay, and again, we're seeing the water mill. I'm wondering if it's the... Okay, that's an interesting... I wonder if the pipes are somehow feeding the water mill, or if it's the other way around, because I mean, we still haven't gotten an angle that lets us see clearly, but like, I still want to know how that water mill is being powered. Okay, and I like the little the fake out where you think she's gonna be just fucking gone, and then she's actually still there, just kind of exploring. So that okay. That is a nice little bit of light expectation subversion. Okay.
すごいのね。こんなところにあなた一人で住んでるの？
ああ、僕の父さん船乗りだからね。ほとんどうちにはいないんだ。 でもその代わりにちょっとしたお金をおじさんたちに預けてくれてるんだ。船乗りはいつどんな目に遭うかわからないから、もしもの時大丈夫なようにってね。
Okay, and I do like how a lot of these little mechanical things that are going on, while some of them are unrealistic, this is actually probably one of the most realistic. I mean, this is a cool shot in the first place, just having the little dripper being at the foreground while the characters in the background. It just leads to some cool shots just aesthetically. But I do generally like how a lot of the technological stuff is, well, some of it is kind of fantastical. Pretty much all of it seems to have a basis in actual, like, real mechanical principles that would have been known at the time. So that's actually really neat. And again, I know I'm saying this while this thing is on screen, which is not a good example of that, because that's actually just a perfectly realistic thing. I don't know if this particular design would actually work, but I mean, you can buy things like this that, you know, they dip into water and then, you know, physics just slightly tips the balancing to make it continually bob up and down.
いいお父さんなのね。
おかげで僕はおじさんと一緒に好きな
Okay,
発
I'm
明や
noticing also noticing some consistent of like those focus issues I was talking about earlier. I am seeing that fairly consistently, not quite to the extent that one scene where it was like actually just very bad. So I'm wondering if that's, I'm thinking there's a good chance it might just be an issue with how this was preserved. Although in some cases it seems like it might be kind of intentional. Like you can kind of see the back of the lion's body is slightly out of focus, but that would actually make sense as a creative decision in this particular shot. Just because, you know, you're meant to kind of see him there. The face is kind of what's important. You don't necessarily need to see the details of the back. But the main focus is on Jean here.
研究ができるんだ。
これがみんなそうなの？
ま、中には失敗したやつもあるけど。でも、いつかは世界中を飛び回れるようなでっかい飛行機を作るんだ。
世界中を？
それで父さんを探しに行きたいんだ。
Okay, so yeah.
お父さん。
I mean, I predicted that earlier, but I don't think that was a particularly out there prediction, is that his whole motivation is to go find his dad, which is presumably eaten by a sea monster, although, again, based on the fact that this is inspired by 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, my guess is that the father is still going to be alive, and that he's going to kind of be just navigating his situation, because, again, that would kind of lend itself to the 20,000 Leagues type of story, that they're probably going to follow some of the basic plot beats of 20,000 Leagues, if I'm guessing correctly. But yeah, so I'm guessing, I'm not, it's not even like a guess at this point. I'm like 95% certain the dad is still alive.
ああ、僕の父さん、1年前大西洋の航海で行方不明になっちゃったんだ。
Oh, that is also interesting to see that this is all in English. Actually, come to think of it, wouldn't it make more sense if this was in French? I don't know.
船と一緒にね。
じゃあ、あの海の怪物に？ごめんなさい。
別にいいよ。それにまだ船が沈んだっていう証拠は何もないし。
そうよ。きっとどこかで生きてるわ。
父さんは世界一の船乗りなんだ。きっとどっかで生きてるさ。
だね。私、バンコク博で見たわ。
残念だけど、こいつは先に発明されちゃったんだけどね。そうだ、僕の大発明を見せてあげる。上の研究室にあるんだ。さ、乗ってよ。
Okay, I'm just interested. Okay, I mean, this is probably me just kind of overthinking it, but like, yeah, well, you definitely could have made a rudimentary escalator in this time period. I'm also I'm curious about just what's powering it. Again, it might actually be that watermill outside that's kind of like generating a consistent force, and that, you know, he just kind of, the lion just kind of put whatever levers or gears needed to be aligned for it to actually move this thing. But I don't know, that seems, again, a lot of the technology here is like somewhat realistic, but also somewhat far-fetched.
壊れちゃった。ごめん、二人乗りはどうも無理みたいだね。
もうインチキな発明ね。
But I actually also do like how they're establishing this kid as a technological genius essentially, but also showing that he has limitations where his inventions are brilliant but not necessarily perfect. That I think is going to be a good setup for tension later on in the series, especially during the more assuming there are more just high intensity moments where they're going to be relying on his technology and seeing that it can sometimes break down. That works. It's a good way of setting that up.
損しちゃった。すっごーい。これをジャンが作ったの？
うん、空を飛べる飛行機だよ。
飛行機って空を飛ぶものじゃないの？
まだ本当に空を飛んだ飛行機はないんだよ。
あ、そっか。6つの十字架になっちゃったのね。
まだ世界中のどこにもないんだよ。
そうなの。ねえ、名前は？
エトワールド・ラッセーヌ8世さ。
Okay, so I mean that does actually answer some interesting questions I was having earlier, where they mentioned that this is 4 years before the Wright brothers successfully made their flight, and even then, that wasn't a very long flight. I think it was something like, less than a minute that they actually flew. But yeah, so this is before actual airplanes existed really in any capacity. So a lot of what they're showcasing are basically just fancy gliders.
あら、7世は？
昨日セーヌ川に沈んじゃった。
ごめんなさい。
いいよ、君を助けるためだもの。
ありがとう。
あれは見つけたよ。お前たち今度こそ抜かるんじゃないよ。
チェンジ、陸上モードスイッチオン。
I just love, again, I love how
mode.
Again, I love the combination of actually being kind of sci-fi-esque, but also just just so hyper analog, very mechanical. Like these ships that they have, these devices, these vehicles are just completely outrageous, but I actually really like them. Like, this makes no sense, but I kind of like it. And actually, it does also... I think it's actually pretty good. Like, when they establish that the kid is a technological genius, Jean, that he, even with his limitations of not necessarily making perfect machines every single time, ones that, can run into unforeseen difficulties, especially when pushed too much, that still can kind of lead to him being kind of overpowered in the grand scheme of things, which would harm any stakes that the villains could potentially introduce. If we know that Jean can just kind of outgun them at every step. The fact that these villains do seem to have like just outrageous technology of their own, and ones that seem to actually function very, very well. Like, we haven't actually seen a mechanical malfunction that wasn't directly caused by like Jean fucking with things yet. So, the fact that even though they're making Jean a technological genius, that he is consistently outgunned is actually going to be a pretty good way to have the stakes feel real.
どうしたの、ナディア？さっきからこんなところで。
なんでもないわ。
I gotta say, I know it's like this thing just doesn't matter whatsoever, and I know that just clothing was different back then, but the fact that he's wearing the tie and his collar is popped up at the same time is just kind of bugging me, because like nowadays that's just not how you do those things. I mean, bow ties are kind of falling out of fashion anyway, but I don't know. Collars are not meant to be flipped up. Nowadays they're flipped up just so you can get a tie around your neck. I don't know. Also, and also this may just be me, but I just also generally don't like it when clothes cover my neck like that. I don't know. I just find it very uncomfortable. So that also might be. Might just have a visceral aversion to that as well. So I may not be being completely fair.
何？君の体重どのくらいなの？
Oh, you don't ask a woman that question.
君の体重さ。
That could.
失礼
cause-
ね。レディーにそんなこと聞くなんて。
How could I have possibly seen that line coming? Yeah.
そうなの？
Right. I mean, I'm pretty sure that was a trope even back then. So.
じゃあほど重くはないわよ。そうか。よかった。じゃあ大丈夫だね。約束通り空へ連れてってあげる。一緒にアフリカに飛んでいこう。でも。
Yeah, those focus issues are starting to get really distracting.
今度は何？
I don't know how much you guys are able to see it on YouTube just due to the fact that I have that filter up, which is, it's unfortunately necessary, but it probably actually obscures some of the focus issues, but they're not like extremely jarring, like they're not like really, really bad, except for that one scene where that one shot of the villain earlier. That was particularly bad, but it's just it's very noticeable for me. And it's even though it's not just like completely just terrible, it's distracting every time it happens.
わからないわ。
Wait, actually, I'm curious.
今度は。
I like how I don't know how intentional this was, and it might just be a consequence of the angle. But that red glow almost kind of looks like it's in the shape of a heart. Although that may actually just be because of the strands of the amulet, might be kind of giving the illusion of a contour right there. I don't know, but it's an interesting visual nonetheless.
わからないわ。
But again, it might just be kind of an illusion based on the angle.
おーい子供たち、もう逃がさないよ。おとなしくブルーウォーターをお渡し。さもないと痛い目に遭うよ。今度は本気だからね。
I'll be honest, this villain's got some
隠
drip.
れたって無駄だよ。もう諦めな。さあちょいと脅かしておあげ。
合点アンソン砲撃準備合点
Yeah, see, like that's what I would expect a collar to be like. I'd expect it to be kind of going down to again cover the strap around the neck. Also, I mean, I gotta acknowledge, I really like the design of these villains. They just look so good. They like it's a little ridiculous, but like also they're just stylish. They got like a very I don't know. They're just fun to have on screen, and part of it is due to their visual design with the white suit, the hat, and then the sunglasses and the colored bow ties.
アンソン砲撃準備合点
こんなもんか。
じゃあどうするの？これで逃げるのさ。撃て！
I mean, one thing I will say also, this is completely just not relevant to really anything, but I am finding it interesting how these Japanese voice actors are pronouncing a lot of the French names, because I don't know, it's just kind of funny, just because I know most of those sounds that exist in French, like that make French sound distinctly French, don't exist in Japanese at all. And even in English, a lot of the sounds, like the zh sound, like that's not, that sort of exists in English, but only really as in loan words, essentially, or words that very clearly come from other languages. Like, but it's become common enough that most Americans, at least, and I'm sure most of people in like Canada, UK, and Australia as well, like will be able to utilize that sound. Like, so like Jean is his name, but their voice actors are saying it more like John. I don't know. But again, I'm not going to blame the Japanese voice actors for not being familiar with that sound, because again, that is actually an issue that's why a lot of Japanese voice actors especially, but in general, when you hear a Japanese person speaking a different language, a lot of times they have a very, very thick accent, and a reason for that is because Japanese has only like a very small amount of syllables. It's actually kind of crazy. They have something like 30 something 30 to 50 syllables, I think, in the entire language, whereas most languages have like multipliers to that, like multiple times that much that are used in the language, which just kind of limits, because if you're constantly bombarded by languages where they just use sounds that don't exist in your language, it's going to be hard to mimic that consistently. Kind of like how I don't know how this is in other parts of the world, but one common thing in America, at least, well, one of the most common languages to learn in school is Spanish. And a very common problem a lot of native English speakers have is rolling their R's. Some people find it easier. Like I never had problems with it, but every Spanish class I ever took when I was in elementary and middle school, we always had somebody who had a lot of trouble rolling their R's, so they couldn't. So they would say correr instead of correr. That kind of thing. And I'll be honest, I'm not as good at rolling my R's as I used to be because I haven't really used it in many years. And also, I'm also speaking quietly right now, and it's harder for me to do that while I'm speaking quietly. But, I don't want to bug my neighbors because it's not like late, but it's late enough that I don't want to be too obtrusive. Intrusive, I should say, not obtrusive. That's not a word. And I gotta say, actually, I don't think they've repeated a song in the soundtrack yet, which is, it's very interesting because, each scene has kind of a unique feel to it just because of the unique tracks they're using for kind of everything. I imagine they can't go all 39 episodes without reusing a track at least once. But it's actually kind of cool that they're giving each scene its own unique aesthetics to it.
てるんだありゃそんなところから逃げようったって無駄だよ早いとこ降参しろ
エトワルとラッセーの発生ねえ二人乗りして本当に大丈夫なの理論上はね
Oh, this actually has like a propeller. Okay. So this is like more advanced than what the Wright brothers did, and this is set 4 years before the Wright brothers did their thing. I'm actually curious. What is, I want to see if I can. Okay, so I have no idea what these dials are supposed to represent because they just say Jean on them. But yeah, I don't know because the one is pointing at 20 and the one is pointing at 30. And then there's a little dial inside of that one. Yeah, I have no idea what these are supposed to represent. I mean, I'm sure one of them has to represent speed, but like, I don't know. They can't be they can't be an altitude meter. For starters, I don't know if any kind of thing existed at the time. But also, they're just not changing height just yet. Well, with Eduardo, with so far what they've established for Nadia is that she wants to go to her home country. She doesn't know where it is, but she knows it's in Africa somewhere. And Jean seems interested in taking her there. So, like she's kind of, and she also did just kind of establish her own freedom, where she seemed to have some sort of connection to the ringmaster of the circus. He seemed to have some sort of power over her, but now that he is gone, she didn't really have a place there anymore, and she obviously didn't want to go with the villain. So I think to her, she's kind of fumbling her way through her newfound freedom. That's, again, speculation at this point, but so far her only like stated objective is to go back to the country where she was born. She just doesn't know what exactly that is just yet. But apparently the lion told her that it's in Africa. Yeah, no, I'm not buying that one. That's no fucking way that was able to survive that, because that looks like it's... I mean, it's just a guess based on its looks, but that looks like a very fragile thing. And early airplanes and early attempts at airplanes were generally very fragile because they wanted to keep them as lightweight as possible, because at the time they just didn't have the knowledge of aerodynamics to make a plane with a lot of mass to it that would be capable of flight like they do. I mean, nowadays we have jets and stuff like that are fucking humongous and heavy, but that we just have a better technology and just a better understanding of the physics surrounding flight than we used to. But yeah, so I'm not really buying that they were able to fly through the trees and get caught up in the branches like that without this thing completely tearing apart, but it's not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. I actually really like Jean's voice acting right there. I gotta hear that again, because that is just raw excitement, and I think his voice actor delivered that pretty much perfectly. Yeah, I really like that. That was really good. So it definitely seems like the first episode was meant to kind of set up the characters. The second episode does seem to kind of be meant to get them out of the home area, to get them kind of moving towards an objective. I'm curious to see what the third episode is going to do, because again, like we mentioned, like we were talking about earlier, since they had an end point in mind with this story, they knew they were going to have 39 episodes to work with. They can actually plan a lot to, as far as the structure of the series goes, where they can decide exactly when everything happens to, fit a cohesive, well-paced story, assuming they do it well, of course. But, so far these first two episodes each had a very clear goal, and I think they both executed on it fairly well. Okay, and again, they're just reinforcing what we saw earlier, is that his technological genius does have limits. Okay, and that doesn't seem like it's going to be a running gag of Nadia kind of bitching every time one of his inventions fucks up. Yeah, more focus issues. That's really distracting.
助けが来るまでは浮いてられるよ。防水は完璧なんだ。今度は水に濡れることもないよ。
That side eye was great.
でも雨には濡れそうね。
Okay, so it's you know, a bit of a cliffhanger, not a massive cliffhanger on that episode. Actually, just excuse me real quick. I'm going to use the bathroom. I will be right back. Okay, I am back. Ooh, let me just quickly double check to say that audio is working on my 3 instances, and it does appear to be working, so that is good. Much better than if it wasn't working. Okay, so yeah, let's just get started with episode 3. So far, I'm enjoying this quite a bit, actually.
時に西暦1889年パリの万国博覧会で出会ったジャンとナディアとキングはルアーブルにあるジャンの家に向かう。しかしブルーウォーターを狙う悪の3人組が万能戦車グラタンで再び襲って
I understand that it's just, you know, an issue of language, but like I don't know if I would want it to be described as there being the villains as a threesome. That just seems I don't know. That's just a phrase that has not necessarily aged well due to the modern connotations of that word.
ウォーターを狙う悪の3人組が万能戦車グラタンで再び襲ってきたのである。ジャンたちは自作の飛行機に乗ってかろうじて脱出するが、
I am hoping that they are
海へ不
going
時
to
着してし
show
まった。一体ナディアのブルーウォーターにはど
more
んな
about
秘
what
密がある
okay
のだろう。
what's the secret that lies behind Nadia's blue water. I'm guessing that this episode is probably going to explore that a little bit, because again it definitely looks like they're kind of hinting at some supernatural elements to things, or supernatural or fantastical. And what the fuck is my cat doing? She's seems to be fascinated by the bathroom scale. I don't know why, but she is just standing on top of it, pawing all over it. I don't know. My cat's weird.
そうか。
The riddle of the giant sea monsters.
姉ちゃん、このままじゃ沈んじゃうわよ。
だからこうして全力で排水してるんじゃないか。
Yeah,
猫の手も借りたいって時に。
yeah. I don't know that a coffee mug's necessarily gonna. Actually, come to think of it, yeah, they probably could bail it out with the coffee mug and the bowl, because That rain doesn't look like it's coming down that hard, although it could just be an animation decision they made, but I don't know. If it's coming down as lightly as it seems like it is, yeah, it definitely seems manageable, although the fact that they let it get as full as it did is, not the smartest thing. Oh, okay. My cat has found a roll of toilet paper now. That's gonna be an issue I'm gonna have to deal with, but at least she's distracted.
じゃん、あれ何かしら。
戦艦だ。
人だ。前方に遭難者を発見。何？機関停止。面舵15度。
I wonder. I mean, were they using crow's nests in these steam-powered ships? I mean, I'll assume that they were, but that's that's an interesting thing because I associate the having lookouts on the crow's nest as more of a thing with sailing ships like galleons and such. But it does make sense that they would have lookouts because you still are gonna need to see over great distances when you're on the water. I don't know. It just seems like an older thing. Because nowadays we don't really use those because we have other means of looking over.
止まってくれる。助かったんだ。おーい。おーい。すごいや。
おーい。無事か。君たち2人か。
はい、そうです。あとライオンが1匹。
よーし、わかった。こっちへ来れるか。
はい、大丈夫です。
それにしても変な船だな。これでは効率が悪いぞ。
違うよ、飛行機なんだ。
飛行機？
うん。
飛行機ってと空飛ぶあれか。
うん。
Well, it can't fly anymore. Again, that's like a shockingly advanced aircraft for the time period, especially considering, again, this is, I think they said 1889 or 1899, was it? Let me see. 1889. So, oh no, it's more than 4 years before. It's 14 years before the first actual aircraft. So before the Wright brothers flew their plane was, again, 14 years after this. So yeah, he's like way ahead of his time.
Ah, 構わん、そのままでいいぞ。
はい。
ようこそ我がエイブラハム号へ。私が艦長のメイビル。こちらが副長のホランド少佐だ。
ありがとうございます。メイビル艦長、おかげで助かりました。
何、礼を言うことはないさ。
Okay, I already like
とし
this
て
guy.
当然のことをしただけだ。ところで、あの航空機は君が作ったのか。
はい、おじさんと作りました。
おお、立派なもんだ。我々も航空機には興味がある。調べさせてもらうが構わんかな。
はい。
Okay, that's actually interesting because when airplanes first became a thing, they were very rapidly militarized. I mean, especially since World War I happened not long after they first started to be it started to be viable to mass produce airplanes. But yeah, and I find it interesting how they presumably these guys are Navy. Although, I mean, this could be a private vessel, but like they immediately see an airplane for like the first working airplane they've ever seen, and they're like, "Oh shit, we could kill people with this. Let's figure it out." And again, this kid's just like, "Yeah, go ahead, fucking do it." Although it's actually really crazy how long it took. I mean, even though they were able to get planes in the air in the early 1900s, it took a long time before they started getting safe. Because, I mean, you look at some of the stats in World War I of the pilots. Like that was probably the most dangerous job in the war. Was being a pilot, and like the fact that like the majority of them ended up dying, and you didn't last very long. It's fucking crazy when you think about it.
君たちがここに浮いていたわ
So
け
honestly, the fact that this kid's still alive is kind of impressive. Because he's presumably crashed 4 other planes before this, ones that didn't work.
大体わけは分かった。その3人組が君らを狙っているわけだな。
はい艦長。
それにしてもこんな子供を追い回すとはひどいやつらだ。はっしゃ！
誰かが僕たちのこと噂してるみたいですね。
I love that. On the surface, that makes no sense. The fact that when they're being talked about, they start sneezing. That's so silly. But whenever these 3 are the focus of the scene, things take a silly direction. Not just in terms of their behavior, because again, their behavior is kind of cartoon villainy, but like fun cartoon villain, not crazy cartoon villain. But also, the technology that they have access to is also kind of silly and over the top. I actually really like that. It works way better than it should.
そりゃ俺の美貌のことだよ。
さんさん、美しいって言葉はね、私のためにあるんだよ。
いえ、私のためにあるんですぜ。
Honestly, that guy's green hair also kind
もう
of
すぐ
works.
20世紀って世の中に何をくだらないこと言ってんだ。
お前たち、そんなことしてる暇があったら、さっさとあの飛行機を探したらどうなんだよ。
Okay, this villain is also starting to grow on me more and more. The fact that she's just completely unhinged, and that the more that she gets thwarted, the more frustrated she gets, the more irrational she gets, the more just insane she gets. But like, again, in that fun, cartoony supervillain type of way. Yeah, I like these. Again, a lot of what I was, skeptical of early on is slowly starting to be kind of alleviated. Like the things that were like, oh, I could see this going not so great. Because, I will be honest, in the introduction to this character, I don't know, I didn't much care for her. But I feel like once she put on that suit, she got a lot more interesting. And that is also, I also just think the suit she's wearing is actually just a very aesthetically pleasing. It's just an exciting character design. I like it a lot.
ですね。
いい天気だよ。なんだありゃ。
例の怪獣退治に出撃したアメリカの戦艦ですよ。
そうか。
Okay, so yeah. Okay, that actually, considering it was an American ship meant to hunt the sea monsters, they almost certainly are in fact Navy. So they're military.
ま、君子危うきに近寄らず、くわばらくわばら。あの飛行機。
Actually, I'm trying to see how good is that. Okay, oh yeah, that's the American flag. Okay, that's kind of neat. It makes sense. It's an American ship.
ブルーウォーターだ。
そうだな。あと3日もすれば一度フランスに戻る。その時降ろしてあげよう。
And I gotta say, if these villains are trying to mess with this battleship, that could be an issue for them, just because, historically speaking, one of the worst things you can do is fuck with America's boats, because we tend to respond to that. It's it's kind of a running joke if you look at a lot of American military history, because the most famous example is obviously the fact that we entered World War II because Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, where that was a major naval shipping point for us, even though they didn't do as much damage as they thought they would. But they touched America's boats, and the joke is Japan messed with America's boats, and America responded by dropping the sun on them twice. But it's obviously a lot more complicated than that. But even back to our earliest parts of our history, we went to we went to war with a lot of Caribbean nations, the Barbary pirates, because they were attacking American ships, and we basically brought them to heel, essentially. Like their era of dominance kind of died after America really took the fight to them. So again, we just have a long history of, you mess with American naval stuff, like it ends badly.
ありがとうございます。
So
ネイビル艦長。
I don't know if, the writers of this show probably weren't like thinking in those terms, but it is kind of funny. And granted, I've also been watching a lot of Fat Electrician videos lately. That is a running joke on his channel, so yeah. So it's been on my mind, so.
僕戦艦に乗るのって初めてなんです。見学させてもらっていいですか？
ああ、構わんぞ、好きにしたまえ。
ありがとうございます。
おい、エアトン。はい。この子たちの面倒を見てやれ。
はい。
姉さん、本気で戦艦相手に喧嘩売るんですかい？
当たり前さ。何事もブルーウォーターのためだからね。
とほほ
コンビ左舷から接近する船があります。
何？おお、あの子たちが言っていた鉄の船だな。副長、子供たちを呼んでやれ。お客さんが来たとな。了解。
I am also very curious to see, because I imagine they're building up to some sort of conflict between the American ship and these villains, because, you know, that just seems just the way this scene is developing. But I'm also just curious as to see how things get kicked off, or if they even do get like kicked off and like they start shooting at each other, because you know, just thinking logically, the Americans would probably be under very, very strict orders to not engage pretty much anyone unless they're attacked first. So, because, you know, if you have a military ship hanging out right by other countries, you know, even for a legitimate purpose like hunting the sea monsters, you probably want to be very, very careful to not accidentally cause an international incident. But I don't know if they really thought of that, but... And I will say, it seems like this also, I do actually really like Jean's excitement. The fact that he gets, whenever he's kind of examining new technology, he kind of gets completely lost in it. I mean, he was doing the same with the three villains when they were on their airship, and he was like, oh, that's really fucking cool. And he had to be reminded that, oh yeah, we gotta escape. So I actually really like that characteristic. It's very endearing.
そういうことは軍の機密なんだ。
ナディア、どうしたのさ？ブリッジが見られるんだぜ。
戦艦なんて人殺しの船よ。そんなもので喜ぶなんてどうかしてるわ。
そっかな。
I mean, there's truth to that, but also a lot of technological innovations happened because of warfare, where, like, I guess, you know, again, I can understand an aversion to war machines just because, again, they're gonna, you know, the point of them is, you know, to potentially be able to kill people, but, you know, at the same time, a lot of, like, big technological things happened because they were developed in war times, because, you know, that there was a kind of a pressing need for innovation whenever there's a major conflict. So I can understand why, you know, a war machine would interest someone like Jean, because he's very interested in the mechanical side of things. And a lot of times military stuff is an interesting application of technological mechanical principles. You know, it's a decent character. Okay, yeah. Alright, have a good night, Alan. Thanks for stopping by.
警告代わりに2、3発お見舞いしてやれ。いい訓練になるだろう。はっ、四方発射準備。
四方発射準備。
姉さん、
Even the warning shots are a bit of a
安全だと思いますけど。
何言ってんだ。これ以上離れたら
a bit of a
追いつけなくなっ
reckless
ちまう
action.
よ。
しかし、命あっての物だれですよ。
じゃあカーシュ、命が惜しくて悪役は務まるかい。
Oh, that focus is just... every time it goes out of focus, it's just so distracting.
とほほ
なんだよあれや。
最新式の旋回砲塔ですよ。水圧で大砲が動くんです。
すごいもんだね。
やばい。
That is very close for a fucking warning shot.
じゃないか悪人にかける情けはない
I'll be honest, that's...
ひどい船だよ、まったく。
Honestly, if these guys aren't military, if these villains, because I'm starting to think they're not, I think that American warship just committed a war crime. Yeah, you're not supposed to fire on civilian vessels like that, especially not in a time of war, of peace. So, yeah. Yeah, we got a war crime, so that's fun. And honestly, like, legally speaking, they are completely within their rights to fire back after that. Like, honestly, the villains are completely in the right here. I'm actually on their side for this one. I mean, yeah, they were going to start trouble, but they actually didn't end up initiating the conflict. Yeah, it's not particularly realistic. You know, like, it's kind of... When I'm talking about realism with this show in particular, it's a little bit difficult, just because there are parts that are meant to be somewhat more grounded and elements that are not meant to be very grounded. And so when I say something is not realistic, it's... A lot of it's going to be just where it feels like it's trying to be more grounded, and it's going unrealistic in ways that kind of detract from what it's doing there. But also there are times when it is definitely designed to be unrealistic as well. So it's kind of hard to really identify exactly when it's going for one or the other. But this is one of those instances where I feel like they were trying to keep the American ship and the crewmates and all that stuff relatively grounded. And the fact that they just kind of open fired out of nowhere does honestly... it feels like unrealistic in a way that they did not intend. Especially since they said that a warning shot and that the supposed warning shot was like literally like 6 inches from their hull. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, granted, if they're far enough out to sea and nobody witnesses it, it's like... I mean, I'm being a little flippant here, but but realistically, it's only a war crime if you get caught. Like, and also we don't know actually what. I'm actually curious as to where the villains come from, because they mentioned that they've been searching all over Europe for the blue water. So I'm guessing they're actually not French. So the French government might not actually give a shit about this. And it also depends on... I imagine they're still close enough to probably be in French waters, but it complicates things a little bit further if they're in international waters, because, like, let's say they are, a couple miles out. I don't know if they are or are not, but if they are a couple of miles out and they're in international waters, and this American ship attacks this civilian... I mean, it's essentially a civilian vessel of an unknown country, but presumably not France. But I mean, France, even though it was French citizens were involved in the conflict, sort of, since they were going after the two kids who were... At least Jean is a French citizen. I don't know about Nadia, but presumably she at least has residency in France because of the circus. But France probably wouldn't want to get involved in this. So they're probably like, you know what, this is a dispute between other countries. We're not touching it. But yeah, even so, it's also, unrealistic for the... So I don't think it's completely unrealistic that there'd be no consequences for this. But I also do think that while kind of crazy-ass captains have certainly existed in the U.S. military before, like, there have been people just kind of going fucking nuts out of nowhere and just kind of doing things. If you really want an example of how sometimes the military can go a little crazy, look up something about the Operation Praying Mantis, where a lot of that was basically escalated by military members kind of pushing boundaries a little bit and trying to manufacture excuses to blow things up, basically. But so it's not impossible that there could be a captain that's like overzealous, but also probably would not have just kind of open fire, especially not having a warning shot would not be right next to the ship. The warning shot would be like over their head, or some or yeah, probably over their head, and it would be very clear that it's like, hey, this was meant to hit you, to miss you. The next one's going to hit you. But also, I don't know what kind of communications they had at the time. That's something, and I'm not going to look it up right now because I'm just that would be, I mean, that would be a little too much time to satisfy a little bit of curiosity, because I know in later periods, I don't think they had, I don't think they had radio at the time. But I mean, in later times, the first thing you would do, even if it was an enemy vessel, would be to try to establish communications to see, if they're hostile or not. Yeah, so I don't know what kind of communications they would do. Presumably, they would still try to find some way to communicate, maybe with flags or something. I don't know. But yeah, this captain is not acting particularly rationally. Also, they are very, very close by for a naval conflict. Like, I imagine I mean, granted, the distances were a lot shorter in history than they are nowadays, but like, usually, like this is point blank range as far as naval combat is considered. So it's actually kind of crazy that neither of them have been significantly hit, and it's actually pretty telling that these villains, their guns don't seem to be able to reach the ship because they are not that far out. Oh, they're dead. Yeah. I mean, regardless, it is an entertaining scene. Like, I'm as much as I'm complaining about how unrealistic it is and how like kind of like it just seems just weird considering a lot of the other writing I think has been, again, I think a lot of what this show is doing has been pretty good. But again, things like this is just, it feels unrealistic in a way that was not intentional. But it is still an exciting scene. And honestly, actually, now that I think about it, they could have changed up the scene in a way that actually would have made this outcome make complete sense, because we already were shown earlier that one of the henchmen fired the gun without approval, like when they were by the house. So I could imagine they just have him do that again, fire at the ship. It's like, oh, they're firing at us, return fire. And then they could have had this exact same scene play out in a way that would actually, militarily make sense, because like I mentioned, a naval captain probably would be very, very hesitant to engage in conflict, especially when you don't know anything about the other ship. But, if you fire at them, then that's all bets are off. Like, yeah, just about any naval captain would be like, yeah, they took the first shot, fuck them up. And I imagine that's not, and that's probably true for militaries around the world, not just the United States.
白旗だ。白旗あげるんだよ。
いいんですかい？
何言ってんだ。命あってのものだねだよ。
You know what? And that is a realistic. That's actually a surprisingly reasonable response from the villain. Is like, say, yeah, give up. We're fucked.
最初からそうすればいいものを。副長、はっ。
Should have surrendered at the start. You started it.
フランスに着いたら警察に突き出してやる。はっ。
かわいそうに。
I was trying to think. Okay, they're turning him into the French police, but like, did they even go with it? Well, the uncle did actually see him off. Like he when he was going off in the plane, the uncle did kind of wave at them. They said goodbye to each other. So I don't know if he like had told him ahead of time, but he knew that he wasn't gonna stick. He knew that he was heading out. So that much at least makes sense. I think that at least is not like a question left unanswered. And yeah, when it comes to the world not being alive, there are elements to that. Again, I'm thinking that most likely the way the story is going to go, because and I'm basing this on the fact that it's inspired by 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I am guessing they're going to be kind of going into uncharted territories. It's going to be, essentially the water wilderness. So again, like the ties to civilization are probably not super relevant long term. But I also do kind of agree that things are kind of happening almost in a vacuum where there just doesn't seem to be the right responses to the things that are happening, particularly with, like the fact that he, uh, I don't know, the fact that this kid has created inventions that are like, actually, like the fact that he created a working airplane 14 years before it happened in real world history is actually like, he should be a fucktillionaire at this point. Like he would be like legitimately incredibly wealthy if he just like showed that to like anyone who had any kind of influence, because then somebody would be willing to pay him a lot of money uh, to potentially be the first to have access to a functioning airplane, even one that kind of is as mechanically faulty as this one is. But yeah, so again, a lot of the individual events, again, don't seem to make a whole lot of sense when they're when you look at like kind of the wider worldly response to them. But again, I'm kind of, and again, I might be giving the show a little bit too much leeway because of this, but again, I'm thinking the direction this series is going to go is going to end up being a case where all that stuff is not going to matter. Yeah. That is also a good point, Eduardo. Yeah, that's actually, again, I could come up with an idea to explain that, but that would also, but that would be coming from me, and just based on a lot of speculation about how the story is, and I'm not sure if that's what the original writers actually intended. Because like I could say, theoretically it was supposed to be, the uncle wanted to have his entry be in the thing, not, he doesn't want to just piggyback off of Jean's invention. He wants to have his own essentially, and Jean's just going to help him with it. But again, that would be kind of me just kind of applying my own logic to the story as opposed to the story having established that ahead of time. So again, that might be but yeah, you actually do have a point with that it would actually make a whole lot of sense for Jean to have his plane be at this fair, especially since actually it seems like, again, it seems like it's essentially the European version of the World Fair, where people showcase inventions and stuff like that, and people essentially try to launch businesses from that exhibition. So like that would be the perfect place to kind of reveal this thing to the public and potentially make a lot of money, like more than the 20,000 francs that would have existed as the prize for the flight competition. My cat has just destroyed a roll of toilet paper, so that's fun. Although I'm also wondering, it's like they said they're gonna turn these 3 into the French police, but like I don't think they actually have any like solid evidence of them committing crimes. I mean, they did commit crimes, but like I don't think the Americans have any actual evidence of that. They just kind of approached the ship, and they're basing it on the testimony of the two of Jean and Nadia. Now, I also don't know what the French legal system works like, so I'm not even gonna kind of speculate on how that would all work. But yeah, I honestly think, assuming if it was working under American rules, they would have enough they would have enough there to stop and question them, but I don't think they'd have enough to arrest them. Yeah, I don't know. That scene I think was meant to be more of a fun scene, and they didn't really think it through. But yeah, I mean, still, it was one questionable scene in a show that I think is otherwise so far pretty strong. Because again, I mean, I think it's serving very well as kind of set up for a larger story. And so far, it does seem like each episode has a specific goal in mind. I'm not sure what this third episode's goal is yet, but the first 2, I could kind of see what they were going for, and I think they executed on it fairly well.
もう食べたのか？早いな。
Yeah, and those are very fair
お腹空いてたからね。
criticisms of Wardo.
それにとって
I
も
just
美
think
味し
they're
かった
just
よ。
not.
そいつは
I don't know. To me, they just don't. I'm probably just not internally weighting those issues as much as giving those issues as much weight as you are. And I'm not sure either of us is necessarily right or wrong for the way that we're kind of experiencing this. Because, again, for me, like I can acknowledge that those are oddities, but I also feel like they're not really messing with my enjoyment of what's going on. But I can also see that being very, very distracting as well. But I'm also, again, basing my own kind of thought process on the fact that, like, it's not going to matter, I think, in a couple of episodes, because they're just going to be in the middle of nowhere exploring the ocean and shit like that. Like, that's where I think this show is probably going to be going. And at that point, it is going to functionally exist in a vacuum. And then, so... And it might just be they're taking their time and getting there, but I don't know. Okay, I'm actually kind of seeing... Okay, this map in the background is interesting. I don't know how well... Let me see how well you guys can see that. You guys actually can't see it so very well on YouTube, so let me actually just quickly shut that off. Yeah, again, I don't know how well you're going to see this, but, like, you can tell they kind of cut corners to make it actually fit in the background, because this is Japan, but it's actually missing the A. China is misspelled, or CH... Yeah, this looks like CHAINA. So yeah, they misspelled China. This just says Mongol, not Mongolia. India is spelled correctly. That says North something. Okay, that's interesting. I don't know. I always find it interesting when they have English in anime, because I've noticed lately some of the stuff we've been watching, when they have English in the background, it a lot of times doesn't even make sense. Like when we were watching what the fuck was it? Actually, let me see, what was it? City Hunter. Some of the English in the background was just like colors, and it was kind of funny.
ありがとう。炊事係にそう言っとくよ。
あれ、エアトンさんが作ってくれたんじゃないの？
No, no、とんでもない。私はこう見えても学者なんだ。
え、学者？
アメリカ合衆国大統領から秘密任務を与えられて、この間に乗り組んでいる海洋学者のエアトン博士だ。
Okay, I also just find it interesting. Just it doesn't really. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, sorry, I'm getting... I think they misspelled ocean in the map in the background as well, so that's fun. But yeah, but I also do find it just interesting. Just this is completely unrelated to anything this show is doing. It does not actually matter, and I just find it kind of funny, just because that's how my brain works. But this scene is functionally an American speaking to a Frenchman in Japanese, and that's funny.
この船では艦長の次に偉いんだな。うん。
へえ、それで軍服を着てないのか。
ああ、そうだ。いいか、じゃん。
Oh, yeah, wait.
軍服を着てないのか。
Okay, no, the ocean is spelled correctly there, both times. Yeah, okay, yeah, so far that all looks... Okay, that all looks spelled correctly. Sorry, this map is just fucking enthralling. I don't know why I'm so fascinated by this map in the background, but... I don't know. It is just like... I don't know, I'm like a dog, and I see like a fucking squirrel in the background, and that's all I can focus on. Okay.
そうだ。いいか、じゃん。すべての生物は2つに分けられる。うまいやつとまずいやつだ。
Yeah. Oh, that's actually a really good showcase of what I was talking about earlier. Yeah. Look at this. Holy shit! I gotta shut this cover off again. Look at how they spelled China. CHAINA. China. That is hilarious, actually. Like, this is such a stupid thing for me to focus on, but like I can't see anything else now. Actually, let me quickly just print screen right there so I can actually have I'm gonna want to take this screenshot and do some stuff with it later, because I find that really fucking funny. But yeah, Okay, sorry. I should not be so distracted by this, but it is just striking to me. It is. Again, I don't know why this is so distracting to me specifically, but like,
やつとまずいやつだ。
I am finding this so funny.
さしずめこの魚はうまいやつに分類されるな。うん。
どうしたのナディア？全然食べてないじゃない
And
か。
again, they're having her eyes covered in shadow.
食べたくないの。
Very
何
common
食べないこんなうま
visual
いもの
trope,
を
but
ナディア君それは不幸だよ。人間の一生は食う、寝る、遊ぶこの3つだ。その一つを見捨ててしまうなんてなんともったいない。
いいんです。動物を殺してまで私幸せになんかなりたくないわ。
ああ、すると君は菜食主義者ってわけだ。
何それ？
知らないのか？肉や魚を食べない連中のことさ。
そうなの？ナディア。
yeah, I'm actually going. I wonder how popular. I come to think of it, I'm wondering if vegetarianism was really much of a thing at the time. I mean, it has to have been because, and especially I know there's some cultures that are vegetarian in nature, but yeah, I imagine actually in Europe that would probably be a difficult thing to navigate just because I know various types of meat are just a staple all throughout Europe, and fish especially. If they're in a coastal location, fish would be a major part of their diet.
いいのよ、キングは。
Okay, and I also, I'm not gonna go back to look at it, but I'm not sure I appreciated seeing the lion's balls and asshole right in the frame like that. I don't think that was entirely necessary.
ところで、この船の秘密にも
I got a cat.
知りたくないかい？
喋ってもいいの？
誰にも喋らないと約束するなら、君たちだけに教えてやるよ。
約束する。
Wait, let me see.
秘密にも知りたくないかい？
Okay, yeah. Part of me wants to complain about this guy just casually giving up like secret information that he's not supposed to, but also part of me thinks that like, you know what, that's probably more realistic than I'm thinking, just because I think of just how many top secret documents have been leaked on like the fucking War Thunder forums over the years. I think it was War Thunder, at least. It might have been one of the other games, but like the fact that that's happened multiple times makes me actually think, no, this is actually kind of realistic. I could see somebody just divulging information they shouldn't because they're excited to brag to somebody.
喋ってもいいの？
誰にも喋らないと約束するなら、君たちだけに教えてやるよ。
約束する。
実はこの戦艦は世界中の海に出没するあの大怪獣を追っているんだ。
なんだ、それなら知ってるよ。
知ってる？
パリの新聞で読んだもん。
Okay, okay, that's funny.
そうか。
でも、どうしてこんなことが秘密なの？怪獣は新聞読んだりしないよ。
Now, how would he know that? Okay, no, I'm just being stupid.
それは軍の機密だ。
でも、これだけの大戦艦なら、どんな怪獣だってイチコロだね。
こちらメインマスト、監修源に怪獣らしきものを発見。
Okay, that's interesting. They must actually be pretty far out to sea if they're actually seeing the sea monsters that have this mysterious type of. Actually, no, they actually don't seem to be that far out. Like, if I'm not correct, that looks like a. If I'm not incorrect, I should say. It would mean the opposite if I was not correct. But if I'm not incorrect, that does look like a coastline to me. So they're actually not that far out. So, okay, I guess my assumption was wrong and that the sea monsters are kind of all over, not just in, like, deep waters, like really far out, like I was expecting. Oh, that's a neat design. I mean, that actually kind of looks more mechanical than like a regular monster. So, but I don't know that. Actually, part of me is wondering that does kind of look more like a boat than like a vehicle than a vessel. Then.
そうはいかん。あいつのためにたくさんの海の男たちが死んでいったんだ。邪魔するな。
測定完了。全手法追尾開始。
Yeah, I mean that is true. There definitely are cultures that are vegetarian. It could be something like that. I'm thinking it's probably more of a personality thing where she just has a strong aversion to killing or a strong aversion to the unnecessary taking of life. Because again, part of her, I mean, she does seem like she is unwilling to have anything that was once alive, or at least once, an animal life. Because plants are alive, but like not in the same way. But she also seems to understand that in the case of King, that he's a carnivore, he needs meat, and so it's like, okay, there's a necessity there. So it's, again, I'm thinking it's more of a personality thing than necessarily a cultural thing, because she says she doesn't remember where she grew up, where she was born. So I'm guessing she doesn't have any intrinsic connection to that culture. But she does, again, but she's interested in exploring her heritage, but she doesn't know what it was, so I don't think her culture would have influenced her really in any way, unless we're kind of going like the writers are kind of assuming that the culture has a genetic component to it, which I don't think is what they were trying to say. But I don't know. You could also be right, and I could just be talking out my ass. That is a very possible thing, because I know I a lot of times joke that I'm always right about everything, but like, that's just a joke.
目標距離12000、速度30ノット。30ノット？そんなバカな。今回よりも速いとは信じられない。
that's pretty fast.
発射準備よし。しまった！逃げられたか。
変だな。何かに追われてるみたいだ。
助かったのね。よかった。
Again, do we really need to see the lion's balls? Again, I'm thinking that looks more like a vessel than a monster. I mean, that glow just looks like lights.
生き物を殺すなんて許せないわ。ねえ、キング。もう、あなたは朝ごはんのことしか考えてないのね。
キングの言葉がわかるの？
うん。他の動物も少しなら。
Okay, so yeah, there definitely does seem to be some fantastical elements as well, like not just unrealistic technology for the time, but also, again, like a magical or supernatural element where she can actually have direct communication with King at least, and with other animals as well. And there's something up with her crystal as well, the blue water.
あの怪獣の心はわからないの。
あいつは悪い怪獣なんだぜ。わかるわけないよ。
怪獣は昔から海に住んでたのよ。それを後から人間が怪獣を追い詰めたんじゃない。
よう、何揉めてるんだい。怪獣はどうなったんだ。
見なかったの？
はは、調理場にいたんで見損なっちゃってね。
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, what you're saying makes sense, Eduardo. Again, I'm thinking it's more meant to be meant for building up her personality, her character, her morals, what motivates her, what her moral lines are. Yeah, and again, I'm guessing it's more of a personal thing than a wider cultural thing that she's doing. So, yeah, that would be my guess. Because they're very clearly trying to establish like a pacifist nature with her. It does seem kind of forced. I mean, I'm actually kind of mixed about it, because like it does seem like this whole development is very abrupt in her, but also none of the situations that had shown up would have actually naturally led to that being revealed. So it's also like actually completely fits within the logical plot line up to this point that this wouldn't have come up. But I don't know. I'm a little mixed about it because, again, it could also just be a case of things that, when explored a little bit further, when developed a little bit more, it might actually kind of just be a case of they kind of an awkward introduction that leads into something that's like that works and is persistent. But again, I will agree that it kind of, this line of conflict between Nadia and Jean, again, it just kind of comes up out of nowhere.
調理場なんかで何してたの？
いや、怪獣の餌を作ってたんだよ。
Okay, I love that. That's adorable seeing the lion jumping at it.
キングじゃあるまいし。
ここでは何でも軍事機密なのね。
軍艦だからね、仕方ないのさ。ほら、こうすると怪獣が出てくるから。
出た！
なんと。
あそこにも。
何万年も前の怪獣が生き残るには一頭だけじゃダメだ。オスとメスの夫婦がいないと子供が生まれないだろう。
That is not necessarily true. Like, that is the most common thing that happens, where, you know, most species are sexually dimorphic, where that's how they reproduce, but there are plenty that don't do it like that. So that's an interesting conclusion to come to. I can see you're an expert on oceanography. No, nothing he said would indicate that. That is not something that you need to be an expert to say. And it's not even correct. Okay, well, I will. Okay, this part of me wants to say this is really stupid, but also, and that like they couldn't necessarily know this as a certainty, but also, again, I will acknowledge that also, you know, he's a researcher. They could very well know more about the sea monsters than I think they do. Like, it could be that they've been studying them for a while, they're trying to figure them out, because they are established as being a persistent thing in this world. So they're not like mysterious and unknown necessarily like they are in the original 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where it's like, you know, it's not really, they don't really encounter the monsters until they're kind of in the areas that people have never gone before. So again, I'll give it a bit of a pass, because, you know, they might actually know that these sea monsters are in fact mammals. So I'll give them I'll give it a pass, even though in my heart I want to say this is a really dumb line of dialogue.
怪獣は右舷後方から接近中。速度32ノット。主砲の速敵はまだか。ダメです。目標が近すぎます。副砲は間に合いません。
Actually, yeah, okay, that's also interesting. I actually like that they kind of included the minimum range needed for the cannons, because that's actually a real thing. If because they can't shoot at too low of an angle, and if you're too, depending on how the guns are situated, but we saw them on like the rotating turrets, so actually, yeah, it would make sense they can't actually angle downwards, so they could be too close. That's actually has been an issue with like anti-aircraft guns. If the aircraft flies low enough, not so much nowadays. Nowadays the technology is a lot better, but back in decades ago, you know, if airplanes flew really low, the anti-aircraft guns couldn't hit them. So I imagine it's the same kind of thing with the turrets and I will say that still looks more like a vessel than a monster to me, but you know, it could also be that's just what the monsters in this world look like. I like the music again. You know.
跳ね返した鉄の音だ
Okay, yeah. Okay, so he says he's making a metallic sound. I think that's supporting that this might not actually be a creature. Yeah, you're probably right, Eduardo. I'll be honest, I completely forgot that was a thing from the summary blurb. So yeah, but now that you mentioned it, yeah, that probably is the Nautilus. Which actually, come to think of it, that means they may well have accidentally committed another war crime. So yeah, that's fun. Although actually, come to think of it, an honest mistake like that probably wouldn't actually be a war crime. It would probably be... Okay, so never mind. It's not a war crime, it's just like the cousin of a war crime.
沈むのかしら心配ないさこの艦はアメリカ海軍の最新鋭戦艦なんだ
その通り近代科学の粋を凝らして建造された
Sorry, but no, if the ship is already listing after like 30 seconds, yeah, no, that ship is in need of some serious emergency repairs or it's going down. Because, I mean, I don't know how ships were built back in the day, but I know in modern times, they actually have like multiple compartments that are designed to, so that if you get a breach in the hull, only part of the hull is going to get filled with water. So, or the part of the ship is going to get filled with water, the rest will not. And you can, now in modern day, I think you can get like the 2 compartments can flood safely. And I would imagine they did something similar back in the day, but I don't know for sure. I also don't know how big of a hole that got torn in this thing.
怪獣は死んじゃったのかしら
まだ生きてる潜ったぞ
そうよ早く逃げるのよでないと殺されちゃうわ
監視左舷から怪獣が直進してきますトリガジいっぱいトリガジいっぱいなんてやつだ司法の直撃を食らってまだ生きているとは左舷前方より何か接近してきます何
That kind of looks like a torpedo?
なんだ
まさか
魚雷だ
Okay. So yeah, now I'm definitely thinking you're right, Eduardo. Yeah, now at this point you just gotta get the fuck off the ship. Actually, I gotta say, the captain freezing up like that, that's actually, like, not okay. Like, the captain needs to immediately respond to stuff like this. You can't just kind of be brooding when the ship's going down. You gotta coordinate the evacuation. I mean, granted, it's military, so that's, most of the crew is gonna kind of already know what to do, but, like, if you're the captain, one of your major responsibilities is to take control in times like this and to get everything into whatever state you can get it into. And I mean, they say the captain always goes down with the ship. That's not like, doesn't mean the captain has to die. It just means that they have to be the last ones to evacuate, and they can't, if there's something they can still do, they need to be doing it. They can't, they're the ultimate authority, but also have the biggest responsibility. So yeah, the fact that he's actually freezing up like this, he's like brooding because he's angry and like in shock and all this stuff. I get what they're doing on a character level, but like, you can't do this if you're a captain. Okay, yeah, no. I mean, again, I'm going to be like that guy and just say that I don't think the ship with that much damage is actually going to, I don't think you're going to be able to limp the ship to a port. Like, if it's, again, it took so much water and it's listing so heavily. Again, I'm no engineer or anything like that, but I think that ship's going down and it would be better to just kind of abandon. Like, I think that ship's a lost cause.
大丈夫かいじゃあ
キングが見つからないのよ。
キングが？
ええ、それに戦艦が。
僕たちが落ちたのに気づいてないんだ。
でもエアトンが。
ダメだ、見てごらんよ。
Yeah, no, they've got
引き返しては来れないよ。
そうね。
yeah, they've got other things on their mind at the moment.
キング！僕の飛行機だ！キング！キングか？
Okay, I mean, I guess. Okay, come to think of it, I guess the aircraft he had probably doesn't have any damage aside from the parts that make it fly. So, because I mean, I remember it was sinking, but that was largely due to the rain getting inside. Although, again, just the physics don't make a whole lot of sense, but that's something I can forgive.
あれが本当に魚雷だとしたら、あの怪獣の正体は一体何なんだろう。
Okay, again, and that's, I mean, I will say that thing personally is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, where the writers feel like they need to just explicitly state the things that they want the viewers to take away, instead of just letting them figure it out for themselves. Because I think that question they're asking, is one that any viewer of average intelligence could figure out on their own. It's like, hey, sea monsters don't normally fire torpedoes, or at least if they existed, I imagine they wouldn't. But so, is this really a sea monster? Probably not. I don't think we needed Jean to narrate that question for us. Okay, so that's the end of episode 3. So I will be honest, as much as I was complaining at the last half of this particular episode, I actually really enjoyed this. Like genuinely, I think there's a lot to praise here. It does have a couple of issues and some noticeable technical issues, particularly with audio balancing. Definitely noticed that a lot of the times, especially in the high intensity scenes, the soundtrack would overpower everything else, to the point where sounds we're supposed to be hearing are completely drowned out, and I don't think that's good. I noticed a couple of issues with things just being out of focus, which is very weird to me. I don't know why that's the case. I can't tell if that's an issue, like a stylistic issue they tried to do, and they just didn't really know how to utilize it. And I would believe that to be the case, just because a lot of what they're doing visually does seem to actually be pretty experimental for its time. So again, it could be a stylistic thing. It also could be an issue just with how this thing is preserved, because I'm noticing things like some grain on the footage, and other little things that are artifacts of preservation as opposed to creation. So I don't know if I can really blame the focus issues on the actual show itself. But as far as the writing goes, there are some issues with it, but I think overall it's actually pretty. It's actually doing a pretty good job. It's still kind of setting up the main plot line. Like the first, and each episode does seem to have a goal in mind, where the first episode was meant to establish the baseline characters of, Nadia and Jean, and to get them in, to introduce them to show who they are, and to get them to know each other, get them to kind of establish the core conflict that's going to be driving them forward. Then the second episode was kind of get them out of the safety of their home and just get them moving. And then the third episode kind of introduced an element of danger and mystery to things, where now we see there's more stuff going on. There's questions we don't have answers to yet. So there's kind of a driving intrigue going forward. So that being said, we have been talking about some of the issues there. Some of the stuff just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. A lot of scenes seem to exist in a vacuum, and there just doesn't seem to be any wider world building going on. But that could definitely change in the future. It could also just not matter, because I do suspect that the show is going to go in a direction where everything is in a vacuum, essentially. But I don't know for sure, and I can only base it on things. But overall, I think this was pretty good. Again, I do think its issues do hold it back enough that it definitely can't be S tier. I think this is probably going to be a solid A tier for me. I think it has a lot of potential, and I think it's it definitely seems to have a good start to things overall. I think it does a lot right. It's just, again, there are just some issues with it holding it back, but this actually might very well be another show that I end up watching on my own, because this looks I am definitely intrigued by it. So yeah, that's going to be it for today. I do appreciate everyone who showed up. Thanks. I always do appreciate you guys, whether you were chatting or just lurking or anything in between. That is always very much appreciated. There's going to be no stream tomorrow because I take Wednesdays off of streaming now, but I will be back on Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to be watching Dear Brother 1991. So look forward to that. And once again, thank you guys for showing up. I had a pretty good time with this, as always, and I hope to see you on Thursday.